All right, I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Tom Schankweiler, distinguished professional and a well-respected voice in IT and cybersecurity. Currently, Tom serves as the director of the Division of Information Systems Security for the Financial Management Systems Group at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid. Prior to this role, Tom served as the director of the Division of Cyber Threat and Security Operations for CMS. CMS is currently responsible for helping administer benefits for more than 160 million Americans. So it's a top target, it's critical, and a significant percentage of the people you're going to see on a day-to-day basis, whether you're going to 7-Eleven, going to school, seeing family for Thanksgiving, depends on it. And so it's incredibly important. Tom's been an integral part of CMS in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services since 2008. In October of 2008, he joined HHS Office of the Secretary as the Chief Information Security Officer. Shortly thereafter, in 2010, took on the pivotal responsibility of leading the security program for healthcare.gov, a program designed to provide and manage health insurance plans under the Affordable Care Act. If that's not enough, Gulf War veteran, a decade of service in the Air Force, and 2 beef jerky stores in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Everybody, help me welcome Mr. Tom Schankweiler. How are you? Doing all right.
I forgot to mention my lovely wife and 2 kids.
And the
Okay.
family.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you for coming all the way from Gettysburg. Hopefully
Yeah,
it's a
no, it was
smooth drive.
fantastic to get here.
Beautiful.
Yes, beautiful drive.
So I want to kick things off, actually, you did an interview I thought that was really interesting with Toggle Mag. It was, I think, earlier this year,
Yes.
and you talked. It was related to FedRAMP, cyber, and a bunch of different things. You shared a challenge for large agencies like CMS. Is not just knowing what's on your network, but knowing whom it belongs to, so that mitigation and remediation activities can be applied. You went on to share, I believe there's a long and complex road ahead, right? And so the way I interpret that in many cases is things are increasingly more challenging. The threat landscape is changing, and as a result, again, we need great people, but there needs to be a great focus because it's difficult as is. I would just love to better understand your perspective on the current state of affairs as it relates to cyber, the threat landscape, kind of jumping off that.
Absolutely. So first, Imagine IT, I just want to thank you all for having us here at Loyola for this great facility, right? Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. I got the gray beard now, so I've been around for a little bit. But the fantastic part of being where I'm at is I get to interact with different generations of people that are coming up. And you're that next generation sitting here at the tables competing. And it's just exciting to see what you guys are going to bring. When I was first brought into cybersecurity, right, there was no such concept. It was just IT, and I was an administrator and did some things before that, but I was a system administrator. And they finally asked me if I would develop some ideas, some plans about how I might protect or how I might audit the servers I was working on. And that eventually led to the idea of security controls. Is everybody familiar with security controls? All right, if not, go out to, the best set is out at NIST. Go out to NIST, look at the FISMA, or just Google security controls. And there are just families and families of controls out there. And one specific one is around pen testing. And so this Capture the Flag event is about those things. And so I encourage you to just get into all of that, right? And you're gonna find that this is an ocean, just an ocean of information, oceans of opportunities. And that's why there's this big gap today in our staffing and this big need. So we have this vacuum that we're hoping you're gonna fulfill, right? And you are learning, you're going to bring what you bring to the table, and we talked about the curiosity a little bit, right? I would encourage you to not get discouraged, right? And what can happen is you work today, you run into problems, right? Gabriel said, every day I run into trouble, every day I run into something that's happening, and I have to kind of work through it. So Gabe worked for me at a time, there in the healthcare, and the day started out with, there was an IT problem, and I would call down to Gabe's group and say, there was a problem in such and such, I need you guys to investigate it, and I need to give an update at 12, so if you get it to me at 11:30, that would be great. Pressure is on, right? They have to give me something, and as we're talking about language communication, I don't need technobabble. I need that technobabble in the technobabble world, but I need someone to take that, distill it, and bring it back to me in a human consumable language. So those soft skills are not just about how we interact with each other, but how do we communicate our ideas, right? And so that's part of the struggle, honestly, that we have, okay? You're gonna be interacting with tools and ideas, as we mentioned AI earlier, right? AI is coming. We're just on the precipice of just learning about it and how we're gonna deal with it. And federal government's coming around with ideas, acts. If you haven't been out to read the new act that's been put out by the White House, you should go read that, right? So what it means is there's a balance between understanding what's happening in the world and understanding your IT and what you bring to the table. And so when you start to talk about strategy, right, because the things that kind of keep me up at night are what are the bad guys going to do to disrupt the business? They're going to eventually disrupt my IT, right? But they want to disrupt my business. So when we hit, anybody know what COVID-19 is? Anybody? All right, so COVID-19 hits, a couple of years ago? And people were heading to the hospital, right? Do you remember all this? Everybody's heading in, everybody's sick, people are outside in tents, like it's just chaos. And what do our adversaries want to do? They want to shut our hospitals down. That's just pure evil, right? And so that's what I have to deal with on the healthcare side. And because they're disrupting their networks, all of a sudden they're back to pen and paper. And they're coming to HHS, CMS, saying, our IT is not working as great as we need to do. We really need to provide healthcare because we need people to live. So we need you to loosen all of the requirements on IT and this and that, and let us share our privacy information. And we need to be able to do all these things in an emergency situation. So all the controls that we have in place to secure, they're gone. And as a cybersecurity professional, you're going, no, why is this happening? Right? But you have to figure out how to live that. You have to help to guide it. You have to get into the mix of it. Right? We saw AI coming out. Like, who's heard of spear phishing? Anybody heard of spear phishing? Just phishing in general? That kind of stuff? I saw somebody who had no experience with phishing sit down at a chat GPT, create for me a blah, 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 to target so-and-so in this voice, go. They look it over, send it, sure enough, somebody clicks. Software is installed, they hack in, they load their software, and we go. No experience. None. We saw it at DEF CON. There was 2 people that went to DEF CON, they sat down and wrote malware in 10 minutes or less. Got it out there. So how do we defend against that? It's very, very, very difficult. So I would say, learn what's going on around you with your laws, your regulations, learn your IT, and learn your business. What is the thing that your business is most concerned about? Because when you can start to connect your IT story, the weaknesses and vulnerabilities to an actual business need, that's where things get interesting. Okay, so the landscape is really about communicating with those that are going to give you the dollars, those that have the message going on. I have to go all the way up to their chief operating officer oftentimes and say, this is what's happening and this is how it can affect the business. And that's when my part of the conversation really starts. So I know the big scope after years and years and years, but at the end of the day, where I get my information from is from all of you. I have to go to all of you, make that call and say, hey, this is what I'm up against, this is what I need, and you tell me what's going on out there. So there's this thing called imposter syndrome. Do you know about that? Anybody heard about imposter syndrome? If not, Google it, write it down, look it up. Imposter syndrome is where you get to the feeling, and this is really important for students. I have a son in IT and cyber who's in college. He's finishing up his second year, going to third. And there's this thing that comes across to you that you don't feel like you are good enough. Like maybe you're trying to fake it till you make it, right? But you get to a point where you go, this is too much. It's too wide, it's too deep, the ocean's too big. I don't feel adequate. What I heard was be curious, right? What I heard is network, negotiate. If you don't have the answer, somebody else in your team does. Use that network, use those relationships that you're building to help bring it forward. And when you start to say, hey, what can I do? Hey, he's in finance. Finance has already solved that. Let me go see what they're doing. That's the landscape that we have out here. Everything is moving so fast, right? And you're gonna see today that you're gonna be working in logs, right? You're gonna Google and look in logs all day long. Logs tell you what happened already. What I need for the future, what you are going to build for us, for this next human world, is you're gonna build the AI, you're gonna build the tech that disrupts things at the moment or before the moment happens.
I want to ask one question before we open it up for.
Yeah, I know. I took the time, but there's a couple of key points I really wanted to get out.
It was perfect. So one question, then we are going to open up to questions. You climbed from being a network engineer to a chief information security officer.
Yeah.
If you look at data, there's 160,000 or so network engineers. There's under 500 sitting federal chief information security officers. And so, to make it simple, you've climbed from a place where there are many to a place where there are very few. And I want to understand from your vantage point, what do you feel that made you different?
Oh, wow. I would say just taking a look at the opportunities, right? I mean, back to what JT said, the opportunity portion is amazing. I've had to interview, I think, a couple times early in my career for things. But after that, it was opportunities that presented themselves. I was able to create some discussion around that, or they created this discussion, and there was an alignment. That's kind of, it really, really took off for me at the marketplace. But prior to that is when I was doing the CISO work. And for me on the government side, I wanted to be at the decision table. And what that means is, as a person who's out in, working in civil world, really, or as a contractor or vendor, you bring ideas to the table, you bring solutions, and you hope somebody buys in. I wanted to be at the side of the table. It's less money, of course, but what you get in trade for that is you get the ability to say, make a decision. And that was what was important to me. So I was able to kind of move from opportunity to opportunity, but I worked every one of those relationships. We had less than 3 years to get healthcare.gov off the ground. And we had to go into the cloud when the cloud wasn't a thing. We were mandated by law to get there. And everybody in the federal world said, you can't do that. There's no control families yet. There's no auditing. There's no this. And I said, well, then let's create it. Let's bring the people together to create it, because I have a law that tells me I have to do this. I'm stepping into that void to try to bring people together to make that happen. So I was bringing my skills, my solution, my conversations into that. So I would say build what you can and go deep, but as a hiring person, I think what you need to hear is I am looking for people that have tackled problems, that have shown that they are willing to contribute, right? I'm looking for someone that can have a little bit of a conversation with me. And I'll tell you, I thoroughly understand when I have to talk to somebody who's an introvert, right? Introverts are amazing people, and they do deep, deep thinking often. And so I have learned how to distinguish kind of those things and pull different kinds of responses out from people. Which you as introverts, if you are one of those people, is you need to learn how to converse and sell your ideas in simple ways, right? Everybody can be successful here. And I know very successful people that are introverts. Okay, and if that's a thing you want to talk about, catch me after one of the things and we can talk about some strategies, because that is one of the most difficult things I think for on the human side to kind of deal with is that piece of it. They're just scared to speak up, or they just don't think their voice is going to be heard. It's almost like, I don't know, you guys know the McFly story? I don't know if I want to sell that book. I know. Anyway, I'm dating myself. But what questions do you all have from the audience?
We have a couple minutes. Yes.
Hi, I'm Daniel with Towson University. As a CISO, can you dive in a little bit into what soft skills you needed to avoid being a scapegoat for issues that were out of control?
Daniel, that's why I have contractors. I put all the blame on them, buddy. No, so I hopefully pride myself a little bit on, I will stand with my people, right? So I expect them to do work, and I will stand behind their decisions. I'll move things forward, and I constantly challenge what's going on. For me as a CISO, it was developing really the relationships and asking a lot as to what do you need to do to be successful? And Fed moves very, very slow at times, but I would work hard to get them the tools they need, the training they need, the opportunities they need. And what I asked for in response was, if I make that happen, will you stick with me? Will you work through these problems? Right? We have, in some of the companies that I've worked with and for, they stayed a long time and they just kept working out the problems. And they were happy to pick my brain about what I saw next. And they were excited for the idea that I would come to the table and say, what are you guys hearing? What are you seeing? And I would go to DEF CON and these other places and just be wowed by the things that are coming. But I wasn't the guy who brought back and said, I saw 10 new cool things we're going to implement in the law. I did not do that. But it's understanding the language. And for me, I need to be like a 1/4 inch deep on all topics and have a general understanding and be able to say that's a BS flag if I ever saw one, and be able to understand it and wave it. I am no longer deep in any subjects because of where I sit, but I know you all are deep, and you all are what keeps all of this going.
What other questions do we have? Yes, in the front.
What skills do you think have the most to become a CISO, and how long did it take you? Because I know for some people it takes them like years, but I also know that other people literally started doing it after they graduated. So what skills do you think are most helpful, useful?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's kind of like what skills are most helpful to reach CISO. I'll say this in the beginning. CISO is a title. It's a great title to hold, but it's a title at the end of the day.
Tom, we couldn't hear. Can you have to repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. I was repeating the question. So the question was, what skills do you need to kind of make it up to be a CISO? And so, I think you need the ability, skill-wise, is just kind of be well-rounded and have good communication skills. For me, the CISO opportunity fell in my lap, and so I took it. There was somebody that was retiring, and they were kind of recruiting, if you will, somebody into that slot. And so the opportunity presented itself, and I stepped into it. I had an interview, but that was more of a formality than than an open competition, if you will. So the skills, I think, at the end of the day, you have to decide if that's a position you want to hold, and if it is, then you're going to have to potentially move around companies to find out where you want to go. There are CISO positions open all over the place. It's just getting that 3 to 5 years experience and going in and doing it and having the confidence to say, I think I can do this job. So if a CISO title is what you're after, you have to fight for that title. You're gonna have to go find jobs, see what the requirements are, and go for it. In the meantime, just continue to build your own skill set, do the things we're talking about, network. But I would say making that your pinnacle to get to that role, I'm not sure, I think it's a worthy goal, but don't make that become an identity, right? I guess is the best way to say that, because it takes everybody's contribution, right? I could be the best CISO, or I can also fail as a CISO very quickly if something goes bad in my network, which I really have no control over at the end of the day, right? I'm empowering everybody else to do their jobs, and hopefully things go well. If I have a bad day, it could be a very bad day for me, because I'm the one that's ultimately holding the accountability flag. Where many of you are not holding accountability, you're holding maybe a responsibility, a consultant role, or an individual contributor role.
We have time for one more question. I guess we gotta fight it out. We're gonna go to the back if that's okay. Yes?
Hi, this is Jay from Loyola. I just wanted to ask how the space for small businesses and startups is in those contracts with the federal government. Like, I don't probably work with the big government contractors, but is there a space for those small businesses?
Okay, so questions about small business. So what's your question, sir? I'll see if I can nail them both in here.
My question was, you emphasize a lot of soft skills and being able to translate that technical jargon into normal human speak. I was wondering if you had any sort of like tips or tricks to kind of help with that, or help with that process, being able to translate those like very hard technical things, especially if you've just Googled it, and
Right.
you can actually like speak on it.
Okay.
I don't know if you can find it.
Yeah, no, I can find a way to merge them together. I'll be much more simple because I know we're just about out of time. So in the back there, so federal government has lots of opportunities. There's actually a whole program for small business, and we've got some great folks right here in the cybervet.org, right? Cybervet.org. So I had an opportunity to actually launch cybervet.org, not really itself, but the original concepts for some of those ideas and thoughts. Myself and a couple other people got together, really wanted to offer this training to veterans. We ended up meeting these great folks that came in, delivered a fantastic program, and now it's actually spun off into its own small business, right? So they've seen the entire organic life cycle. I would definitely pick their brains on that. But if you go to Small Business Administration, SBA, you'll find there's just a ton of information for small businesses and how to get into it. And there's space specifically carved out for small business, women-owned, veteran-owned, on and on and on. HUD facilities, all those things. In regards to your question about how to make things simple, is I will kind of talk about my day a little bit, or things that I'm learning about with anybody that will listen that's not in cyber. So I'll be like, hey, this is my day. I had this kind of thing happen, and then if they glaze over, I realize I've lost them. If they ask questions, then I kind of go into it. But I start very simple, and I also like to use stories. And so especially when I'm talking to senior executives, I'll say, well, we had this event today. We think it's going to impact this particular program, right? I'm worried that it's going to potentially shut it down for a day or two, or I'm going to make a recommendation that we actually turn off the service for 24 hours to allow our people to check some things. And if everything goes well, we'll get it right back online. But if we don't, my concern is that this could spread to other programs, right? Well, how confident are you? Well, from what I'm seeing, I'm pretty high confident, and so if I make a recommendation to shut it down, I'm pretty confident. Okay, I'm going to go with your recommendation. You're the expert. Let's shut it down. Or they're going to say to me, yeah, there's no way you're shutting that down, right? And I go, well, okay, can I mitigate it by doing something else? Now, I've probably come out with my plan A, B, and C before I sat down to have that conversation. But I'm really, unless they want to dive deep into the technology and what's happening and who the actor is that's attacking us, I typically don't go there. But I'll relate it back to things people know. So if it is, hey, did you ever get friended by somebody on social media that you never knew, but looks really, really cool to get to know? Yeah, that might be, somebody who's trying to get to know you for who knows what reasons, right? Then they want to share things with you. Or is it weird that, I just happened to walk by Lowe's and boop, like an ad pops up for Lowe's, right? How does that happen, right? And then people go, yeah, how does that happen? And then you sit down and try to explain things to them. So it's about having human-oriented conversations with people that are not part of your community and just practicing it. That's my best advice. And there's some good books on it as well. I can recommend a couple, but I won't do that in a public setting.
Mr. Tom Schankweiler, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, great.